Hello YouTube, this is Snacks, and today we're doing some more story time. Yeah, this is just parts of my life that have been either funny or entertaining, I hope. So this story is kind of why I'm so much into console gaming. Growing up in an era like I like to call the console wars. So let me explain. Growing up, of course, there was Nintendo, Super Nintendo at the time, and the Sega Genesis. And this is all happening in the late 80s, early 90s, by the way. And I guess all these companies just saw the success of Nintendo and Sega and was like, hey, let's make our own system. That sounds like a great idea. Yeah, let's do it. And they did. And we just had a flood of consoles between, like I said, the late 80s and early 90s. And this is just me recalling each system from memory and a game from that system just from memory. There's no certain order. I'll put down what year they actually came out somewhere on the screen. So let's start with the Panasonic 3DO. I don't remember much about this system. The only game I remember for it was a Street Fighter game, and that's about it, truthfully. This system was very forgettable, sadly. Next was the CDI, and the CDI is famous for one game, Zelda. Like you've never seen Zelda before, even if you try to forget. I don't know how this came to be or the story behind it, but yeah, this is Zelda. It's on the 3DO. Yeah, let's just move on. So as all these systems are coming out, the Sega Genesis is already out, but they want to update and try to keep up with everything else, so they came out with the Sega CD. And of course it has Sonic. And the games I remember for it there was a game called Afterburner. It's like a jet fighter game, and one called Night Trap. I definitely remember Night Trap. That was the two that I specifically remember for that system. So out of all these systems I've been naming so far, other than Nintendo and a Sega, this is the system that I came very close to buying, actually. The Atari Jaguar. Atari came out with another system called the Atari Jaguar, and they had a game called Aliens vs. Predator. And it was kind of like Doom, first-person shooter, and I kind of wanted it. And I came this close to buying the system for that game. The reason I didn't buy it is there was no other games at the time that I really liked on the system. So I didn't break down and buy it because of that. Next is another one of my favorite systems at that time, the Neo Geo system. I really enjoyed this system. If I remember correctly, all I remember for this system was fighting games. They had Fatal Fury, which the Bogarts, I love the Bogart brothers. Samurai Showdown, which another series I absolutely love, and King of the Monsters. Just picture like Godzilla, King Kong, and they're fighting in a city. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole game. You're just fighting as monsters in the middle of a city, destroying the city as you're fighting. It was so much fun. Now the Neo Geo had really good graphics, like arcade level graphics. The worst problem was the price of the system and the games. Okay, so the system, if I remember correctly, was over $500, and this is the early 90s. Keep that in mind. And the games were over 100 each. So yeah, that's one reason it never saw light of day. And the last system that I remember from this time period, which the system should have made it, it really should have. The reason I don't think it made it, one of the reasons, is it just didn't have a good library of games, truthfully, was the TurboGrafx 16. It had amazing graphics. The only thing was the games just weren't that great. The two that I remember off the top of my head was Splatterhouse, was like, you look like a Jason from the Friday 13th game. You look like Jason, and you just go around killing stuff. It's just blood and gore. That was the whole selling point of that game. And a game called Bonk, which was their main character game. It's like a caveman. So you have Nintendo, Mario, Sega, Sonic, and Bonk. I mean, there's no way that can compete. They just had no good games. That's one of the worst things about it. But it was a great system, though. It had great graphics. And speaking of the graphics, it probably had the best handheld at the time. Like, during that time period, there's 4 handheld systems. There was the Turbo 16, Turbo Express, the Game Boy, the Sega Game Gear, and the Atari Lynx. So you had 4 handheld systems at that time. And the Turbo 16 game that goes in the console goes straight into the handheld. So it had amazing graphics. The downside, I think the battery lasted to 4 hours at the most, if that. But yeah, it was really nice growing up in that time period, though. I mean, the time there used to be a store called Toys R Us, which just sold toys and video games, and you just would walk in, and they'd have this giant display case, and it was just filled full of all these different consoles and video games. It was just so amazing. I just really remember that, and it's just a good memory. But I think that's why I'm so attached to consoles more than PC, because I just grew up in that era where it was just so many consoles growing up. It was a really fun time to grow up, in my opinion. I enjoyed it. But I hope you found this story somewhat entertaining. It's kind of like one of my more informative videos, I guess. But I guess it happens. But this has been Snacks. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, thanks for watching.